Hi everyone, welcome to our third video in the cultural studies series. Today we are going to look into the prominent theorists in detail. Under the Frankfurt School, we have Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Jürgen Habermas, Herbert Marcuse and Walter Benjamin. Under CCCS, we have Richard Hoggart, Stuart Hall, E.P. Thompson and Raymond Williams. The Frankfurt School was closed in 1933 because the thinkers of the Frankfurt School were Jewish and the Nazis forced them to leave the country, and later these people settled at New York. Max Horkheimer. He was famous for his concepts like critical theory, authoritarianism, militarism, mass culture, and poverty. His prominent works include Eclipse of Reason, Traditional and Critical Theory. And he is called father of critical theory. What is critical theory? Critical theory is all about critically analyzing the cultural artifact. It opposed the traditional theory because the traditional theories were observational one, but social science differ from natural sciences. Social sciences need social experiences. The questioning ability should be there. Rationality is a major concept of the critical theory. Critical theory asks people not to believe anything without critically analyzing it. Unlike a scientific theory, it is self-conscious and it is a cognitive understanding that seeks to analyze how and why false perceptions arise in specific situations or specific context. Max Horkheimer talked about critical theory in detail in his work Traditional and Critical Theory. In his work Eclipse of Reason, Max Horkheimer discussed how the Nazis in Germany were able to project their agenda as reasonable. They completely disappeared. They completely made reason to get disappeared in the country. Next, let's look at Theodor Adorno. He is known for his works The Authoritarian Personality, Negative Dialectics, and one more famous work written by him is Minima Moralia. Together with Horkheimer, he wrote the work Dialectic of Enlightenment, and one chapter from that work is The Culture Industry. From the chapter The Culture Industry, we get the famous term culture industry. Actually, the chapter was subtitled as Enlightenment as Mass Deception. So in this work Dialectic of Enlightenment, both these writers were criticizing the false enlightenment during the 18th century. So they call 18th century enlightenment age as a deceptive one, and they criticized it as a failure. The emerging cultures and technologies make people enlightened, but that is not true. It's just a mass deception because everything is produced by ideology, and these people completely oppose ideology. Adorno, a trained pianist, he himself was against the popular culture, especially music, because the popular culture had become part of the culture industry of the capitalist society. This popular culture creates false consciousness and false psychological needs, and the culture was like the industries, the culture or cultural products were being produced like goods in the industry. That is why they gave the term the culture industry. Capitalism, in the era of capitalism, mass production of cultural goods were going on as we produce goods in factory. The goods include films, magazines, etc. It makes people docile and create false psychological needs. Next, we have Herbert Marcuse. He was known for his works Eros and Civilization and One Dimensional Man. The subtitle of the work Eros and Civilization is A Philosophical Inquiry into Freud. Can you identify the famous psychoanalyst given in the picture? He is none other than Sigmund Freud. Actually, Herbert Marcuse was influenced by the concepts of Freud. Where do Freud get the term Eros? Eros refers to the Greek god who is associated with love and sexual pleasures. In his work, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Freud gave the concepts Eros and Thanatos. Eros refers to the life instincts and sexual gratification, and it also includes gratifications of all the senses, whereas Thanatos refers to death instinct, or it refers to negative attitudes like anger, repression, suppression, and other instincts. So, Herbert Marcuse derived this term from Freud, and he titled his work as Eros and Civilization. And here, the instant gratification or satisfaction of senses arrive because of the capitalist society, because they produce mass number of goods in the capitalist society, which create false psychological needs. And people in the industrialization era wanted instant gratification, and they are used to instant gratification. Since there were so many false psychological needs, people do not question the government and its schemes. So the people were one-dimensional, and still people are one-dimensional. They don't think about other things except their instant gratification. So there were no critical thinking, no rebellion. People were like horses moving like one-dimensional man. He gave the term repressive desublimation. Before moving on to the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, let's look into one more theorist under the Frankfurt School. He was Walter Benjamin. He was known for his essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. While Adorno and Horkheimer were against the popular culture and they criticized it in their chapter, The Culture Industry, Walter Benjamin supported the commodification of works of art because he believed this commodification and the popular culture introduced radical political views to the proletariats. Next, we move on to the theorists under the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. The foundational text of this school include Richard Hogarth's Uses of Literacy, which is subtitled as Aspects of Working Class Life, and Raymond Williams' Culture and Society. It's important to note that most of the theorists from this school belong to working class. Since they were from working class, they could understand the plight of the working class very well. The notable works from the center include Off-Center, Feminism and Cultural Studies, Resistance Through Rituals, Youth Subcultures in Post-War Britain, The Empire Strikes Back, Race and Racism in 70s Britain. So, look at the very title. They are against the elitist notion of culture. They are resisting the dominant culture. Say, resistance through rituals. These people are resisting, right? Next, we have race and racism. So the concepts which were once marginalized, like feminism, subcultures, race, were brought into the mainstream discourse. Here it is important to note that The Empire Writes Back was an important post-colonial work. If you know the author of this work or authors of this work, kindly mention them in the comment section. Next, we move on to the important theorist under CCCS. E.P. Thompson. In 1966, he coined the term history from below. He was known for his seminal work, The Making of the English Working Class, and his other works include Time, Work, Discipline, and Industrial Capitalism. Zero option. It's important to note that writing degree zero is the work of Roland Barthes, whereas zero option is the work of E.P. Thompson. Sidney Pollard praised this work, The Making of the English Working Class. He called it a landmark in English historiography. E.P. Thompson has written biographies of William Morris and William Blake. He is called a socialist humanist, and his journal is The New Reasoner. Now let's look into the work, The Making of the English Working Class, briefly. Unlike other historical works, E.P. Thompson directly went to the houses of the working class people, collected sources. He even went to courts where the working class people are questioned and where they were not given the authority or a chance to speak. And he collected all the details and he produced it in his massive book, The Making of the English Working Class. It runs to more than 800 pages and it can be called the first significant work on the working class people in Britain. And he defined class as a relationship. It is not a social structure, because when we bring the term structure, there is hierarchy. According to the cultural studies school, there should not be any hierarchy. Okay. So he studied the documents of the lives of the working class people, and he went to courts, he collected court records, and he listened to folk songs, music, ballads, and as a working class man, he very well know the plight of the working class people. And he also studied the development of the working class consciousness, how working class people think and how their thinking shapes their life. And prior to this book, historians wrote their works from the perspective of power. History is itself not true. It is not true in its nature. When we look into new historicism and the works written by the new historicists, we come to know that history itself is a cultural product. Okay. Next, we move on to Raymond Williams. Raymond Williams gave the significant definition about culture. That is, culture is a whole way of life. Culture is ordinary. Every human society has its own shape, its own purposes, its own meanings. I repeat the important quote again. This quote was mentioned in his essay, Culture is Ordinary. Culture is ordinary. That is the first fact. Every human society has its own shape, its own purposes, its own meanings. Other important works of Raymond Williams include Culture and Society, The Long Revolution, Communications, The Country and the City, Keywords. He was a well-socialist, Marxist critic of culture, and he talked about popular culture, and he was also from a working class community. In his work, The Long Revolution, he talks about a cultural revolution which is going to be, actually this revolution didn't occur, actually it is his own prediction, and this revolution would be against the public ownership, private ownership. And in this work he talks about the three levels of culture or three types of culture. Dominant culture, this refers to the clearly visible aspects or practices embodied in the majority of the people. Example, consumerism. Residual culture, residues. It refers to the culture which we do not follow completely, but residues of it can be found in contemporary age. Example, Gandhian values. We people don't follow Gandhian values, but still some people here wear Khadar dress, dhotis. So residues of Gandhian principles still exist. That is called residual culture. Emergent culture, it is also called oppositional culture, counter culture. It is a new cultural practice that are being constantly created in modern culture, and it attacks the dominant culture. For example, in mainstream culture, we talk only about male and female, whereas LGBT community or queer theories, they are counter cultures. They oppose the emergent culture, and it must be noted that every emergent culture can become dominant culture in one point of time, and every dominant culture was once an emergent culture. And in his work Communications, he says reality is created by people who possess power in media. In his work The Country and the City, he examines the country life and city life that has been prevalent in England since 16th century. And his important work Keywords contains the vocabulary of cultural studies. It is subtitled as A Vocabulary of Culture and Society. Raymond Williams and Marxists. Raymond Williams belongs to the New Left. His works include Base and Superstructure and Marxist Cultural Theory, Marxism and Literature, Resources of Hope, Culture and Materialism. We all know Raymond Williams introduced the term cultural materialism, but it was not explained in the work Culture and Materialism. Actually, this term was coined in the work Marxism and Literature, and it's also important to study the works in the chronological order so that we can answer the questions in the examinations easily. Cultural materialism. So in his work Marxism and Literature, Raymond Williams introduced this term. So culture itself is a material process, and it comes under means of production. New historism. Actually, cultural materialism and new historism align themselves. Actually, their principles are almost the same. The major difference is that cultural materialism is more political, since cultural studies is a political movement majorly, whereas new historism is a literary practice. Okay, new historism, this term was coined by the cultural theorist Stephen Greenblatt in his work The Power of Forms in English Renaissance. New historism refers to giving equal importance to literary text as well as non-literary text. So when we analyze a literary text, it's important to look into history as well. And new historians like to study non-canonical work alongside canonical work. Why should we study Shakespeare, Milton alone? We should also study the writers who were given less importance, and according to them there is no distinction between high literature and no literature. The major theorists of this school include Stephen Greenblatt and Jonathan Gallimore and Alan Sinfield. Stephen Greenblatt completely analyzed the works of Shakespeare. Let's take Tempest as example. So according to the perspective of the new historians, Tempest was written from a perspective of the racist Shakespeare. Here, Caliban, the villain, the antagonist, is actually an innocent. Prospero captured the island of Caliban and made him his servant. Similar situation happened during the colonization. The English people arrived here and they captured our land as they captured Caliban's land, and they made us learn English. Similarly, Caliban was taught to read and write in the language of Prospero. In one act, you could see how Miranda teaches her language to Caliban. And here I have listed a few important works of Stephen Greenblatt. Next, Stuart Hall. He was famous for the works which are given in the slide, and he was always against the conservative Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And most of his works, he criticized Margaret Thatcher. And he also gives the term mugging. Mugging refers to street violence. The black people, the Afro-Americans, were arrested without question. If any crime occurred at any point of time, they always arrested the Afro-Americans without any question. And his work, Circuit of Culture, in the work he talks about the 5 stages, the 5 processes that are involved in examining a cultural text. Actually, the idea was derived by Hall, not only Hall, and also his other friends, and major critic among them is Paul Dubé. Okay, so he has also written one more work together with Paul Dubé, and that work is Doing Cultural Studies. Now, in Circuit of Culture, he talks about 5 processes that are involved in examining a cultural text or a cultural product. They are production of culture, consumption of culture, identity, and identity means like agents that are involved in producing that culture, can be human or non-humans. Regulation, how the cultural products or cultural production is regulated by formal and informal rules. Representation, which refers to the signification, what do the cultural products signify. So these are the 5 processes: production, consumption, regulation, identity, and representation. And these are the major journals of this school. New Reasoner, Universities and Left Review, New Left Review. Actually, New Reasoner and Universities and Left Review blended, and so we got this New Left Review. And with this, we end our 3rd video in the Cultural Studies series. If you want more videos and more contents from our side, do encourage us by liking this video, sharing and subscribing. Okay? Your likes and shares will motivate us to provide more useful content to you in the upcoming days. Thank you all.